Hey everybody, it's Alan Hitchman with Sticky Icky Live, and we have got a great show tonight. I had to give my full name because we went through half a show last week. And like, what's your name? So I wanted to give that, I guess that'll be our new thing. But I have a super special show tonight because a good friend of mine dropped off a car out of his collection. And some of you may not know this, but we actually do two shows. So we do one on Tuesday nights, and it has been primarily around kind of what we call classics. So classic pan cars is something we've been going through. But tonight, we're going to steal a little bit of content that we're going to show on Tuesday. And it's going to go a little bit deeper than we'll go tonight. But we're going to show what I think is one of the most special cars that we've had through here. So earlier today, Jim Pullman came by the house and dropped off one of the most, I think, classic cars, let me focus in, that has ever raced the dirt oval scene. And I wanted to share it with everybody and give you a little bit of information. Again, we are not going to go in as deep as we normally would on a half-an-hour show because we have another topic to talk about a little bit later, which is what's going on with the Ghost. And I'm pretty excited to give that announcement. But I wanted to go through this car and talk a little bit about the history of it. So if you're not familiar at all, this would have been a late 90s, actually probably early 90s time frame dirt oval car. This is actually set up for a modified late model. Now, there's a few interesting characteristics about this car. One, you'll notice this weird nose. It was actually modeled after what they called the Batwing, and that was what the car was known as, was the Batwing. Another thing that you're going to notice is it has this huge, I believe that's a 6-inch side dam, if I remember the rules, but just an incredible billboard down the side of that car. There's a really good shot of it. And then it's got a little bit of a wicker bill, a little bit of a spoiler back here, but just incredible. So if you go to Trackside's Facebook page right now, well, not right now, because you would miss out on this show, but if you were to go to Trackside's page in a little while, like at 9 o'clock, you can actually see not this car, but the car that this was built after running in one of the Dirt Nationals at Trackside. And I think that was 92. Jim will correct us if it's not later on in the year, but later on next week. He's coming on the show on Tuesday to give us the lowdown. So if you like this, come back. He's got some great stories to go along with it. A couple of other things really interesting is there's a ton of body work that's done. He's broke these sides. He's got some breaks down here. He's got some flares out. Now, what's really special is what's below this body. Now, not that this is a cool body and all, but that's not where this thing gets interesting. So let me give you a little bit of a history lesson. So Custom Works started basically at the beginning of what we would call the specialized dirt oval cars. So before this, you would have had RC10s, conversions, maybe a couple of other home-built cars. But in the dirt late model scene, and this is when Custom Works was in California, they came out with their initial cars, and we'll have one of those on Classics in a couple of weeks. But they came out with a custom-built car. The Dominator was the first, and then they had the Intimidator, which was the two-wheel drive car. At the same time, you had another car, which was called the Titan, and that's actually what this is. This is a Titan after it had been bought by Trinity, and it became known as the Reflex. Now, a couple of pieces of history that play into this that are notable. If you're familiar with Jim Dieter, this is the car that brought Jim Dieter, when he sold the rights to this car and also the manufacturing of this car to Trinity. He took a job over there and has become one of the most legendary motor builders, frankly, in the history of RC cars. This has got some unique things. One, and we're going to cover this in a couple of 3 weeks, but there was actually something going on that was, well, let's use the word notorious. I think that would be the right thing. So In this period of time, just before this car would have come out, and the reason I'm bringing it up now is we'll show you what the solution was. There was a movement to begin to put silicone on the outside of foam tires, and silicone tires became incredible. They used a GE silicone, and they dominated. In fact, if you didn't have silicone on your tires or impregnated into your tires, and what we're going to do an entire show on that, so I don't want to get into it, but those became illegal for a lot of good reasons. It basically led to the end of the dirt oval scene by most accounts. And it just caused a whole bunch of issues with the track owners and everybody. So they decided to ban it. Now, when they banned those tires, they went to a couple of different things. So the foam tires still just didn't work. These were the solution. This is a TRC. Now, some of you guys that ran pan cars in the day are going to know, hey, those are TRC pan car tires. Well, they were, but I just learned, and I didn't know this until Jim stopped by, TRC also made a line of, these are primary colors, and so I think it's an orange, I think he said a yellow, a green, and I think it was yellow and greens. Now, they ran different compounds around the outside. What made these incredible is that cap tire technology had not been invented as we know it today. So if you go buy a cap tire from BSR now, what you'll see is the rubber goes all the way around the edge of the tire and comes back to the rim and is glued down. These tires didn't have that. What they had was a band that was glued around a foam tire. So this is actually foam. This is the cap. There's a seam that you won't be able to see because these are pretty worn in. Actually, I might be able to position it. You might be able to see it right there across the camera. That's the seam. So they would take and basically do like a belt around this, and then they would send it out. Now, there were a few things that occurred. It brought in the era of tire balancing because these tires were notoriously, twice I've used that word, they were really bad at not being balanced. And so everybody had a balancing technology or theory or thought. Most of it involved either lead that you would steal from a fishing lure to set the buoyancy, or it came down to stealing some push pins out of a sewing kit and shoving those into the foams of the sidewall. Both accomplished the same thing. What we wanted to do is see those roll around. Now, moving past the tires, we're going to go a little bit quicker here because I want to get to some other things. And again, that's not really the purpose of this show, but I wanted to show some really cool technology that led to a few things. So Novak 410M1, which was the class of the field then. This is a Novak 27 megahertz FM radio receiver. If you haven't seen one that size, start watching classics more often. And then this is going to be a Hobbico Commander. Nice. I didn't even notice that. I was assuming that was going to be a Futaba. And on the very back, giving us a little bit of propulsion, you have a Jim Dieter. And he said the signature is on here, but I think it's not where I can see it, or I'd show it to you. And this is I think he said it was an 8-turn. So really cool brushed motor in here that Dieter had his hands all over or in the early days. Now, black battery pack. These were 1,400 cells, and these were Trinity. So they were Trinity matched packs. Again, I don't want to get into a whole bunch of the details on the running gear. That wasn't the purpose of what we wanted to show. So a couple of things that are of extreme interest. One is these front steering, whether you call them a carrier, whether you call them a camber block, whatever that is. When you see these, there's a couple of things that are interesting about it. You're going to say, one, you should say, hey, how about you focus the camera and that you move the car? You're going to notice that they look very similar to a modern day Custom Works. In fact, these precurse that. They were made by Robinson Racing, and very similar design to what Custom Works had. Don't know who had it first, but these are Robinsons. Now, what's interesting about this is these carried for 25 years. These Cub carriers actually stayed around and then were replaced a few years ago when the mold wore out, and then they were cleaned up, and that was when Arnie was at Custom Works. He cleaned up the mold, and that's where you get the modern part that you have today. But imagine that, 25 years of this car's technology moving forward. So when you think about kind of the old days are new again. A couple of other things of notice is this is original bumper, is just a Kydex cut bumper. Again, it's got the a very similar steering rack to a modern. It's got two arms and then equal length tie rods. It's got a couple of different positions that you could move the cambers links in and out, but it did not have where you could change the heights of those. It's just side by side, longer or shorter. And then as we move to the rear, this is the most interesting thing. Let me flip it over here. These are the original, and we were trying to muse on it, but these are actually adjustable toe blocks. Now, what we'll do on Tuesday, we'll take the wheel off, show you how they worked, but these are actually a really interesting piece because what they allowed you to do, one, you can move the shock position in this hole. Two, you could actually take this, rotate it around, put it back on, and you could pick up about a half a degree per rotation. So it was it wasn't certainly fine tuning it in, but it definitely had a pretty amazing technology behind it. And then no CVDs. That is actually a low-Z slider. Again, really cool stuff going on. So last thing that I really wanted to get into is notice where the body mounts go down. They actually go down to the chassis versus our modern day mounting them on the onto the shock towers. Now, the reason they had to do that, one, is the shock tower is way forward in this car because you've got a direct drive encased in the back of this. So there's actually a pinion that you would adjust through that hole, and you can actually see it down in there. And then a still today stock ball diff that's inside of there. And so the weighting of this car and the shape of the car is actually really similar to a modern day car. And I think that's the most incredible piece out of this. So we're talking about this car's 30 some years old. And the vast majority of the technology from that dates all the way to today. And so what we've really been doing is refining technology after technology after technology. I asked Jim, I was like, hey, how about I take this to Easley or Little Dixie this weekend? He said that would be a thing that would end our friendship. So we won't be able to get to try it out on the track. But again, if you want to come back, we're going to deep dive into this car on Tuesday. But let's do this. Let's look over and see what we've got going on for stuff. The old Batwitch. That's right, Todd. Let's see. Jones called them nipple wedgies. I would love to hear that. Silicones. I was wondering, Todd, if you had some of those. And actually, if somebody does have some old silicones, PM me. I would love to bring you on the show and show those off. I know there's got to be some out there. I don't have any. I've checked with a few other folks, and they don't have any. But at the very worst, maybe we'll even make some. I got the lathe up behind us. Maybe we'll make some on the lathe. Let's see. Push pins and a prop balancer. That is exactly right. That shows your age right there. Let's see. Coins and I still have a stash. We're waiting for an open tire rule show. Oh, see. Yeah, there you go. Goodman's got some. And make it happen. That would be hella fast. Yeah, I got a couple of silvers back there too. We could have definitely an interesting open wheel show. If you do silicones in a different class, we could do silvers. That would be highly entertaining at Coins Place. I don't know. You'd have to dig the track up and replace it probably when we were done. One last piece, and then we'll move off of the car and onto some other topics here. And if you've got any. Oh, Brad's got a bag. Well, you should come on. I'll send PM me. We'll work out a time to do that. Now, what I wanted to do is show, and this is something that's fallen out of favor in the most recent years or in a while, is this Y brace. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is the graphite obviously was different then. So if you're from that age group, you'll know that we went from, this is sheet graphite, and we went from that to the woven graphite that we use today. The sheet graphite, and we'll get, again, we can get into it a little bit more, but basically it delaminated. Now this car is extraordinarily heavy. I bet it's all of 60 ounces, definitely all of 60 ounces. And what's interesting is that it's got a pretty stiff chassis. Now it picks that up from this Y brace. Now what's interesting is if I go torsionally though, and I tweak this, it's actually got a fair amount of flex side to side. It's got no flex front to back, but it's got a ton side to side. And it's funny when you think about today, that's where a lot of drive comes from, is being able to lock the rear down. We put a lot of flex into the car. This car was designed to have torsional flex, but not front to back flex. So again, just some really cool, like I said, I'll show you the bottom really quick. I did hear that it ran in one race. Apparently they didn't, must have ran the thing on carpet. It's just an amazing piece. So that is the story there. So I'm going to go back. Any questions on our friend, the Reflex? Let's see. I have a bunch of caps, Brad. Let's see. I'll PM you. And we'll work that out. Let's see. Team SLC. I don't know those, Tom. So anybody else on the Reflex? Any other comments or anything you want to see on this one? And I will put this out there. If anybody has really cool old cars like this, we would love for you to come on the show. Again, Tuesday nights is when we go through most of the old stuff. But in this case, I wanted to cover some of the technology and just show you, hey, as much as we think we've progressed, Mr. Dieter and gang had a pretty good handle on stuff about 30 years ago. And let's see, anybody else? Which one do you have, Danny? Do you have a do you have the Titan, or do you have one of these? One of the Reflexes. Let me put that there. And I'd like to see an original Titan TXO myself. There's got to be. I mean, there just has to be some out there. They made enough of them. The other one I'd like to see is the, and this is getting a little bit rarer, but the Cobra Nemesis. I don't know if a lot of you guys remember that. So that is the end of the little bit of the memory lane. Todd, do you have a Titan? Oh, yeah, Danny, you're going to have to get with me and find out when you're coming on. We got to get that worked out and get that nailed down. All right, so, oh, Brad, so there's a few out there. Come on. Send me, if you guys are available on a Tuesday or Thursday night, we'll get them on the show. We've got a pretty cool way of showing those off. And there's just a million old stories from it. It's really incredible. So I wanted to get into a couple of other pieces. So one of the things we've been teasing now for a few weeks, and a lot of you guys know what's going on at some level around what we're calling the Ghost. And really what it comes down to is a pretty simple idea that I think we're becoming known that we have an extraordinarily high love for a car that was made about a decade ago and kind of went to about 6, 7 years ago, called the BM. It was a BMS car. It was made in the Pennsylvania area. Ran great. Tragedy struck, and they stopped manufacturing it. And we had collected a couple, wanted to see how they ran, had a lot of success with the car, and started running them again. The problem is, obviously, is that everything is on the secondary market. Parts are super hard to find. And what I thought was the most tragic out of this is I don't think a week goes by that we talk to somebody that has a BMS car that they believe is just absolutely too precious to run. They don't want to break parts. They don't know where they could get parts. Most of them are either discontinued, really super hard to find, or they're in really bad condition, or they're in really good condition and nobody wants to put one on a racetrack. So we also had the same problem, and I think some of you guys, if you've been following the Sticky Icky feed for a while, about every month we're like, hey, does anybody have any parts? What do you know? And we were able to get a collection of multiple generations of cars, and then we were able to assemble a timeline from that. Again, the challenge is, though, you're hitting the wall, or you get erected in something, or something wears out. Where do you get that next part? And the supply chain of that was pretty difficult. So Reese and I made a decision about 3-4 months ago that we would start manufacturing some of those parts and make them available, not only for our own use, but we made them available for guys who were running BMS stuff. And we had a few friends that are on that, like Jim Pullman. And we decided about a month ago that we would do what we're going to basically would like to do is some idea around a BMS part exchange. That doesn't really seem to be, most people don't want to get rid of their BMS parts, couldn't figure out how to do a core change on that. So what we've decided to do is we're going to offer some direct bolt-on parts, not trying to take anything away from the good folks that did BMS, but what we want to do is make sure that there are cars that could go on the track today if there was a reliable way that you could get parts. And so we're going to begin some pre-ordering, and I was going to show you some of those cars. So the first one is we've actually recreated. I just noticed there was a little bit of a piece of plastic on this. Hold on. We've actually recreated the front arms. Let me zoom in here for you of the car. And each part that we did, we wanted to make sure that we had one. The most extraordinary thing of the BMS car is the craftsmanship and just their attention to detail and some of the most amazing workmanship that we'd seen. The materials that they chose were incredible, from the Delrin that they chose to the 7075 aluminum. And we thought it would be tragic to do that any less. So these are, you know, in some cases, think of them as modernized replicas of the similar parts. These arms are machined exactly, you know, very precisely. We've got some great machining on it. You guys can get an idea of that. This is a short. It will be the first, and if we get a demand to make a little bit longer one, we'll produce those. But these will be available for pre-order on sometime this weekend. We'll get them up on the website. We've got limited quantities of these, but we're going to continue to produce them. And like I said, we're very stiff, same as the original arms. They bolt on. All of the sizes are exactly the same. Every pinhole has been measured and is the same. We did make the pins a little bit smaller, so you will need to ring those out for whatever pin you're running. There was some variance in that. So with the old adage, measure twice, cost once. So we went a little bit smaller than that, so you'll be able to get those to whatever pin that your car was running. You'll be able to do that. So this is the arm. Like I said, these will be available for pre-order. We'll take about 2 weeks for all the pre-orders to get done. So we'll and then they'll be on the website. So if you want some early on, now is the time to keep watching the website. We'll bring it up on Facebook when they're available, but that will be the Ghost front arm. And one of the other things that we wanted to do is make sure that we put a mark on it so folks would know that these are not original parts, because the last thing we want is somebody trying to sell a pretty sweet BMS car with original parts. These are not of the same value as the original parts. These are, like I said, kind of the idea is, you know, you can buy Dorman parts for your Chevy truck. You can get some of these Ghost parts for your BMS car. The second part that we have, let me turn, I guess, the other way so the writing is right way, is we have updated and recreated the bumpers. Again, the thing that, and I can't stress this enough, and it went down to everything that we're doing on this. One, it's dirty, but two is the machining quality has to be of equivalence to what you had with the original car. So you're going to see very high, very high shiny bumpers. Again, it's a Del rim bumper. We have fixed a couple of issues with it. So one is we've strengthened some of the ribs where there was breakage, and we were able to still keep some of the lightning out. We'll have two versions of this. This is the original bolt-on shape. It's very similar to the original shape, and we'll have one that's made for an MR Customs body. Both will be relatively available within, like I said, in the next couple of weeks. It bolts right on to your BMS car with no work at all. The other thing that we did is when it comes to the BMS, and you're going to see some different colors on here. This is actually the test rig that I'm showing. Is we milled out the bottom here, so you actually get a flush piece. That's to protect your precious BMS chassis. So we didn't want to have where you hit something and you're chipping that chassis. So this bumper is actually designed to make sure that it protects your BMS parts, because getting another BMS chassis, if you've got one, is something you're not going to want to damage, right? So again, pardon the different colors. This actually came off the test rig. You probably see a little bit of dirt on it because it's been out running. The next piece to show is the front tower. Again, we have basically updated the design, took a little bit of weight out of it. If you're going to run the original style and you want to have the roll bar in the front, this will not work. If you're going to run it more in the traditional modern day style, this bumper works. Again, proudly showing its BMS heritage here, and bolts right onto the car. I wouldn't say it's a direct retrofit because we've actually made a number of changes to it. These locations and pinholes are exactly the same as your BMS car. So you can basically break one of these, pop it on, and you're back racing. We carry that same design. It's hard to line up the ghost on these. To the back body mount. So this piece, again, you can see it's mounted onto the BMS blue. And this is designed for a couple of things. One, good grief, this is hard to do. Let's see, it goes this way and over that way. All right. So this has got a couple of just minor updates. One, it allows you to run, and you can see them on here, the GFRP body mount system. Let me pan you out a little bit so we don't have so much work on this camera. There we go. So if you want to run the GFRP adjustable body mounts, we put the hole for the 440. If you want to run the bigger ones, you'll have to machine that out. So it does allow you to do updated body mounts. And then you can slide it back and forth. So these are actually slotted now versus the single hole. It allows you to move the rear of the body around. Let me get one more. There we go. And so that's the same thing. It's made out of the same 3mm graphite. Obviously the modernized version of that graphite, but 3mm stock. And then the last piece worth mentioning, and you'll see the reflection in there, is we have recreated one. And what we tried to do is pick, frankly, there was about 11 to 12 variants of the late model chassis. What we did is we kind of took an aggregate of those, tried to put them all together, take some of the best or worst. This is a chassis that we've ran up north. We've ran it at Little Indy. We've ran it at Little Dixie. So we've got a lot of confidence in the car, handles appropriately to what the original BMS car did. And so this one is pretty close. I wouldn't say that it was the end of the run, but I would say it's a mid-run similar chassis. It is stiffer. It is 3.5 or 3. It's 3mm thickness. So everything, all your BMS parts can bolt directly on, and you would be ready to rock and roll. So if you've got, no one ever really wore out the aluminum pieces. So if you've got the aluminum pieces, you're able to throw the thing together, get a couple of other parts, and you are rocking and rolling on the car. So that is what we're doing. We've kind of been teasing it out a little bit because we had a whole bunch of pieces that we weren't too sure how they were going to go together, get all the manufacturing lined up. But that's really what we're up to. We're planning on doing as it makes sense, we'll add some more pieces and parts. There's no way that you're going to get 100% car because some of the parts are just not available. They were a mismatch, or a mix is a better word, a mix of multiple manufacturers, and those manufacturers have stopped pulling those molds. So you can still find rear end parts. If you scour pretty hard, you can find some of the front end pieces if you scour a little bit. But what we really wanted to do is make it so that if you've got one of these cars, you've got the confidence that, hey, I can actually run this thing. The chances of bending the motor plate is extraordinarily low. In fact, it's 70-75. And if you're not familiar with how aluminum is, that's about as hard of aluminum as you commercially would make a car out of. You can get harder, and you can go to Boeing, you can do a whole bunch of stuff. You can head over to GE and pick up some pretty stout stuff. But 70-75 is some of the best aluminum they could have made. And again, it's not going to wear out. And that's really the story around it. So let me go and see if we have anybody talking real quick. And I don't, let's see. You got your own museum, get the building already. We were talking about that today. We just moved into a larger building, and to keep all this stuff in. It's got the boat and the race trailer, and now a whole bunch more room. Let's see. I know Chris is looking for a BMS sprint car. Well, buddy, we now have about 2/3 of everything that you need for that sprint car. We just got to find you a chassis. And then, yep, Walter, you've got a late model, I think. So again, I appreciate everybody's support on everything that we do. We've got some awesome fans and some awesome customers, and we really appreciate that. And the one thing that's most important out of this is that no way are we taking anything away from the incredible cars that BMS made. All this is we want to see them back on the track. So if you've got one, PM us. We'll tell you everything that we've been doing with them and how we're getting them pretty quick. If you want, meet us at the track. We'll be happy to help you with it. But let's get those cars back on the track. They were phenomenal. And just like at the beginning of the show where we said, hey, 30-year-old technology in the Reflex is still fast. I promise you that 15, 20-year-old technology in the BMS car can still go around the track pretty well and hang with some of the new stuff. So if you've got them, brush them off. We'd love to see them on the track. If you've got them, want to get some parts for it so you can get it up to look like a better shelf queen, then we're happy to help you out with that. Give you a little bit of logistics. This weekend, you'll see an announcement on Facebook and Instagram when all the parts get onto the website. The parts that are on the website may not be the final production parts. We're still adjusting for that, but we got enough of the pieces done that we feel really comfortable to show you kind of the direction that we're going. And like I said, we would love to see some more. Let me see if we have the one that is missing is the 2012. See, that'd be a great car. And we will be racing this weekend. I do not know where yet, Mr. Tommy, but I'll give you a call once we figure it out. And Danny, are you planning on making a complete car? So I can say that we are planning on making a complete car for a limited number of folks right now. Yeah, and there's a tiny group of folks, but it's a long process. Everybody that's been involved in this knows it's an extraordinarily long process, and yeah, we'll see kind of where it leads. Certainly, it's not going to be an entire BMS car. We have no plans of doing that. All we want to do is get folks back to racing that and continue on with the heritage that those guys set. But yeah, hold on. There might be some cars, and we'll be campaigning hopefully some of our stuff towards the end of the Score series. So we're pretty excited about what the future holds in on that. But again, no release dates, no plans on anything production, and it's pretty likely that it won't go full production. But yeah, we're going to have some of those pieces. So that said, anybody, comments, thoughts, anything on that? If you need more information or have some more interest, like I said, we're available all the time. I know you guys send us emails and texts. Keep them coming. We appreciate that. If you've got an old car, get with me because we want them on the show. We're going to do a little bit more around heritage. If you got a BMS car and it doesn't have a home, give me a call. We're always buyers. And if it doesn't have all the pieces, get the pieces on it and come on out to the track. And that is, let's see. Richard, we're going to have to start a group text. I know some guys are going to Little Dixie. Some guys are going to Easley. It's like everywhere. If you're in South Carolina, the racing is fine, boys. So, a Badger would be cool. All right, I'm going to sign out. If you have anything for us, like I said, get up with us. Take care, and we'll see you Tuesday night. Jim Pullman's on the show, and he's going to be talking that entire show just about the Reflex and giving us some really cool old stories. And I think it's just going to be a lot of fun. So we're looking forward to having him on. And then I'm going to pressure Mr. Stockman into joining us in 2 weeks, or maybe next week, and showing off that Woods car finally. So, all right, everybody, take care, and we'll see you Tuesday.